Almost every single person I've come across, not just in this room, in this space, but in the art world, has spoken so lovingly, so fondly of her. She was someone who was such a champion of contemporary African artists, not just looking at how the rest of the world views us, but ensuring that the artists are developing and growing, and I think that's such a beautiful thing. So this evening, just before we hear from some awesome speakers who will be coming up to the stage, I will just remind you of the way that this talk will run. It will be an hour, 15 minutes. In the final 15 minutes, there will be ushers going around with cards so that if you have questions or comments that you want to add into this talk, then they will be read out. And please, we ask, of course, that you put your phones on silent or off, not vibrate, so as not to disturb the talk or people around you. Now I'd like to welcome to the stage to give a few words Tokeni Peterside, founder and CEO of ArtX Collective, the company that executes ArtX Lagos. Tokeni.
Thank you, Falu. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this conversation that is so significant to so many of us, all of us in this room. There are so many faces here who were near and dear to Bisi, and I particularly want to recognize the presence of His Highness the Obi of Onitsha, who flew in from Abuja today, specifically to join this conversation, wanting to be present at it. I'm not going to take up too much time, but a number of people have asked about our connection to Bisi, and I just felt that it was important to share a story from the perspective of ArtX Lagos with regards to the phenomenally important role that Bisi played in the creation of this fair. In the summer of 2015, I was in the middle of my MBA and returned to Nigeria to do extended research on a project that I had been developing. I wanted to create an intervention in the art world and had conversations, for example, with Emeka, Ogboh, Caro Akpokere, Pedro Alatishe, so many different artists. I reached out to Bisi and asked if she would have a one-on-one conversation with me, and in her usual generous way, she obliged, so we met at the Jazz Hall. We had a hilarious conversation talking about so much, and I was telling her about the different ideas that my friends and I were coming up with. We didn't conclude on that conversation, but when I returned to Nigeria in January 2016, I was armed with a business plan for what would eventually become ArtX Lagos. And in the course of that, I was a bit gun-shy, to be honest with you, to begin this art fair at a time when Nigeria's economy was starting to tank. And so I was hedging my bets, looking into multiple projects. And I called Bisi one day about one such project, completely unrelated. A collector was looking to develop an art library, and I knew the phenomenal work she was doing around the CCA, so I called her to discuss this. And when I tell people this story, sometimes they think it almost sounds too good to be true, but it's the truth. At the end of that call about this library project, Bisi said to me, "Tokeni, have you ever thought of organizing an art fair? Because I think you could do it, and I'd be very happy to support you in the event that you decided to go ahead." And I remember saying to her, "I don't think you know how incredibly spooky it is that you have said this just now." And she was like, "Okay," and I was like, "Yeah, sure, we'll talk later." 2 weeks later, she was back in Lagos, and I was in her office at the CCA with that business plan, and she looked at me like, did all this happen in 2 weeks? And I said, no. This was sitting, nestling there, and the vote of confidence that she gave in that moment would eventually grow to become unflinching support. In that first year of trying to create this art fair, Bisi, as our inaugural artistic director, was a source of strength, support, and love to our team. We were a very young team. You know, it was myself and many young interns in their early 20s. We called her Miss B. She came into our office once or twice a week. She made us laugh. And at moments when I was incredibly terrified about this undertaking that at the time was struggling to get corporate support, she was an emotional source of strength. Some of the fondest memories were when we switched the name from Art Lagos to Artex Lagos. And I called her, I said, Ms. B, Lagos State has said we can't have Art Lagos, so I'm going with Artex. She was like, Artex? What does that mean? I said, Art X, Lagos, Art and Lagos, two entities coming together. She said, that one sounds like X-rated though. I'm not sure. I said, Ms. B, trust me on this one. Some weeks later, she was like, Art X, Art, people are loving it. The other one was Artex Live, the music festival we were creating. She was like, hip hop, all these guys, you want to bring them in? I said, Ms. B, we must do it. This is how we engage with young people. By the week the fair was opening, she was even talking so much about Artex Live on her Facebook page. And she was saying how she was so proud to be part of this fair that was changing the model of what an art fair usually is. The week Artex Lagos opened, that was the week of November 4th, 2016. We were setting up and installing at the Civic Center. She was dancing the entire afternoon. You know that her dance where she'll be pushing and moving. And with everybody that came, she was dancing. She was helping them carry stuff. She was a force in the room. We had absolutely no idea that at that time, she knew she was unwell. There was nothing in Bisi's persona, nothing in her demeanor. In fact, she was traveling so much that I used to say to her, Miss B, aren't you tired? Should I, please? And she was doing so much. We had not the slightest clue because she was filled with strength. She was larger than life. And I will never forget her pride that November 4, 2016, when we stood up on stage together and welcomed, amongst other guests, the Obi of Onitsha to that first preview. After the first fair, we worked out that it would be quite challenging for us to continue on with the work because Bisi had so many other projects she was doing. And one of the things that I know is that my team and I will be forever grateful to her for that year that she spent with us, where she was a support, she was a friend, she was a shoulder when we were at our weakest. Times when I would say, Ms. B, I don't think we can do this thing. I don't think this is the right year. And she would say, we absolutely have to do it. Do you need me to give you money? I said, okay, I'm coming. Let me go back to Access Bank and push them. So she gave that strength to us and to so many. And I see faces in this room of people who I know she was an incredible support to. So I want to thank you all so much for coming to this evening to celebrate her. And we're really looking forward to hearing this conversation between Ngone, Antawan, and Emeka. Thank you very much for the attention we know you will give to this.
I would now like to invite to the stage Ngone Fall, curator and consultant in cultural policies, also the editorial director of Paris-based contemporary African art magazine Revue Noir from 1994 to 2001. Ngone, if you could please come up. Thank you so much. Also, Antawan Byrd, who spoke with us yesterday as well, I'd like to invite him up. He's the co-curator of this year's Lagos Biennale, How to Build a Lagoon with Just a Bottle of Wine. Would you please come up? And somebody else who we heard from earlier during the talks yesterday as well, Emeka Ogboh, a phenomenal artist who explores through hearing and, of course, taste and his audio installations, which are incredibly impressive. Thank you. Would you please come up?
It works, okay. I thought Tayo was going to moderate. I wanted Tayo to moderate so we can all hide behind Tayo, and Tayo is now rebelling. Thanks. I'll keep that in mind because, of course, I said I didn't want to do it. Let's be honest. I didn't think I had the courage to do it, and the Artex team didn't want to take no for an answer. Then Tayo said, I will moderate, and now I can see the coup. Tyre is not moderating. We'll sort it out later. Okay. So when Tyre asked me to talk about BC, I said, of course, I can't. I'm not ready. And then I said, okay, let me ask two guys to join me on stage so we can encourage each other and that we make sure we're not going to cry. It's the last talk, and we're closing ArtX, so we must not cry. So I did rehearse with Emeka, so that gave him the opportunity to cry. So today, my former bodyguard is not supposed to cry. Anyway, so I think what we will say is talk about the anecdotes of how I met her and the kind of journey we had together. And so that's why I asked Amaeze Ojekere to be here. So just to give you a little bit of background, and that will tell you how old I am, even if I look very young. In the early 90s, it was a time where in Europe and in the West in general, people were saying there's no contemporary art on the continent. And I joined that editorial team, Revue Noire, that was the first contemporary African art magazine. There was no internet in those days, the young ones, no mobile phones. So the only thing to know what's happening on the continent, you have to be on the continent or travel around the continent. And so I was also trying then to build a network, going to these different countries, different cities, and also trying to figure out who are the protagonists on the continent, whether it's curators, art historians, and who are pushing boundaries. And that's how I started sending letters to Bisi. So we were exchanging letters. She was the first of her generation to graduate in curatorial practice. Young ones also, you have to know that. All of us, we are outsiders. I come from architecture, Okwi comes from political science, people like Simon Jami come from literature. Bisi was the first in those days who really learned that profession and was operating in London. I was the West African French-speaking from Senegal, based in Paris. She was the West African English-speaking, based in London. I speak English, she speaks French. So of course we had to meet. I mean, that was something obvious. The two ECOWAS girls and the only one operating internationally, talking about African art, contemporary African art, promoting the continent. And so we started exchanging fax. I don't think fax exists anymore, and letters. And we were saying, okay, if you ever come to Paris, I will be happy to meet you. If you ever come to London, I will be happy to meet you. And at that time, so that was around 95. And it's in 98, I think, I was working on a big publication about the anthology of African art from the 20th century. And of course, I wanted to make a big highlight on Nigeria because of what it represents in the history of African art. And I worked the way I usually work in those days, is to hire people in these different countries to do the work. So I contacted Amaeze Ojekere, who was a photographer, who will go to collectors to take pictures of the masters of modern art in Nigeria that they had in their collection, so we could have good quality pictures for the publication. And so Amaeze came to Paris and we're discussing his contract. Endless. Of course, you're talking money with a Nigerian. And then the next day, Amaeze said, oh, I'm still in Paris, and by the way, there's this Nigerian curator, I think you should both meet, blah, 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 her name is Bisi Silva. I said, yes, we've been in contact. She said, okay, she's in town, so let's have dinner together. So it's thanks to Amaeze that I first met her in person, so that's why I asked everybody to invite Amaeze so I can acknowledge that in front of everybody. So we were supposed to just have a quick dinner, and of course we started talking endlessly the entire night, and then the next day, and then we stopped having a long-distance conversation between Paris and Dakar and London, how to go about things, how to move forward, who are the curators. It was a very small group in those days. Today, everybody says, I'm a curator. You have curators, new generations. Everybody's working internationally, but in those days, it was really an empty land. And the struggle with the West saying there's nothing on this continent. How do you prove there is? How do you move forward with not just showing art, but having a critical discourse and moving ahead? So we had different conversations. We're talking about strategies. And of course, at that time, then I stopped Revinoir in 2001, went to Belgium, and I was one of the curators of the 2002 Dakar Biennial. So I called her in London saying, you have to be involved. This government biennial is too much French-speaking focus, and it has to, if we're saying it's a Pan-African biennial, we have to open up to the English-speaking countries. And because you speak French, so come please give a lecture, and you have to squat, hack, and infiltrate this biennial. So she came, did a lovely speech in English, and everybody was saying, who is this woman who speaks with a British accent like she's Queen Elizabeth? And she was yelling at everybody, as you know, Bisi, tough woman, bossing everybody around. I don't know about the pictures. I did send Tayo some pictures. There is one picture of that day. I did send some just few moments of Bisi and myself in different places around the world, just to see how she used to talk about me, saying, I'm her sister curator in crime. And that's also what she posted for the first ArtX on the social media, like, meet my curator, sister curator in crime. We used to play also games when we were going to conferences or to panels in different parts of the world. She will be the good cop, because that was her decision. She would say, I'm your elder anyway, you don't have a say. And you always look angry because you're skinny, so you're the bad cop. You are going to be the bad cop because you have a large voice. Even when you're talking politely, people think you're yelling at them. So anytime we're going to a conference, we will end up making a mess. And so then we were identified as these two short, loud black people who are just traumatizing everybody. But it was about being true to yourself and having this kind of integrity. Do not lie to yourself. Why are you into this profession? It's not for fame. Social media didn't exist at that time. How to arm the next generation. And that's how we started having these endless conversations about the state of the art schools, the state of the curriculum, education, education, education. And we were in Liverpool when she was talking about, I'm opening a space, and that was CCA Lagos. And then it opened a year after that. And then she was saying, we have to move forward. How can we be helpful? You have a kind of random, confidential mentoring group. I also have one. How can we merge? Well, okay, I'm even saying it to Wolof. This is the picture in Dakar in 2003, when we got out of the office of the Ministry of Culture trying to convince them to do something more international. And so you can see our faces. So obviously you can see who the bad cop is. We looked miserable. There was no electricity. There was no air conditioning. And this is in the kind of office before you get into the office of the Ministry of Culture. And we're debriefing how disgusting that meeting was, because it ended up nowhere. And she was just like, mais c'est pas possible, that it's not possible. This is your country. And I said, yes, Nigeria is worse. So at least let's try to do something here. And we're taking it as a starting point, and maybe we could, you know, continue the journey. So this was in 2003. Yes, and it was crazy. And we didn't look like star curators the way people see curators. So that's how also the ASICO program started, with having young artists and young curators and saying, how can we arm them and have this kind of 6 weeks intensive program that she started first in Lagos for 2 editions, then did it in Ghana. I was supposed to lead it, then my mother got sick, so I had to pull out at the last minute. And then she said, I hope your mother is really sick. I'm going to call her to figure out, because I'm sure you're busy somewhere else. She used to come to Dakar in those days for Christmas to take a break, saying, I've moved back to Nigeria, but this city, Lagos, is killing me. I need a break, so now I decided I'm only having holidays on the continent. So that's how she also decided, I'm having my holidays in Tunisia, or I'm going to Dar es Salaam, I'm going to Zanzibar, to Cape Town. And she was constantly coming to Dakar. And it will be like maybe December 25th or 26th, and I will receive a phone call on my mobile, like, hi, I'm at the airport. Can your mother send a driver? I'm like, are you serious? Who do you think you are? And my mother said, it's for Bisi, send the driver. Okay, so we'll send the driver. Of course, she met my sister. They are the same age, so 5 years older than me. And because my sister is very quiet, like Bisi, so they decided to eye-lie. So every time we were going out, they will eye-lie again, like, shut up, young one. You talk too much. You drink too much. You smoke too much. By the way, Bisi doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, unless I'm around. So I was her evil. She would say, shut up and give me a cig on it. You talk too much. You're talking nonsense. Okay, you also, old lady, shut up. And then one day, my sister started introducing Bisi, said, oh, meet my friend Bisi. She's a colleague of my sister. I'm like, when did that happen? Yes, she is my colleague, but she's also my buddy and my friend. Now, who are you? And they would say, you don't exist. I say, okay, fine, girls. At 10, I'll put you to bed and I will go partying. So these are just the backstories of the different projects we did together, whether it's Bamako. Also, I don't know if there's a picture of when it comes, I will show you. The National Museum of Bamako did build a new building to host temporary contemporary art exhibitions because it's an ethnographic museum. And so for the inaugural exhibition, the director called me and saying, I would like you to curate the first show for 2007. We were early 2007, and the building was supposed to open in October. So we had less than a year. And I was saying, okay, we have so few opportunities as curators to do projects on our continent. We're always doing exhibitions and part of projects abroad. I want to share this opportunity with others. So, of course, Bisi was the first that I called. And I also called another colleague, Rashida Triki, from Tunis. So the three of us, we gathered in Mali, and we started working with the museum, and Bisi gave them hard time. Samuel, at the end, I was saying, these two are behaving like a couple. She almost traumatized Samuel because she was so strict on the rules, the methodology, how to deal with artists, their own contract, artists have to be paid, etc., etc., etc. So by the time the exhibition opened, they were the best friends. And when I came back in 2015, when Bisi was curating the Bamako Biennial that you were part of, the two were like real buddies. So it's been a journey for me, and so I'm just talking about these anecdotes, not to talk about the loss, and the fact that it's difficult sometimes to be in some conferences and panels, and people are talking about African art, like I discovered Ella Natsui, seriously. I remember being in conversations with Bisi and other curators in 2005, and they couldn't even say the name. They had no idea who he was. So this sense of I'm owning Africa, I'm the expert of Africa. Those are the bad cup, good cups that we've been having. And it still happens today when I'm hearing people saying things, and I'm like, seriously. And we will just text each other like, who pulls the gun first? But now there's nobody I can text to because, yes, she's no longer there. So it's a kind of empty space that I'm in, but it's also thanks to Bisi that I first met Emeka when she said, oh, there's this crazy young guy who is working with sound. So Emeka did say how Bisi asked him to go to Cape Town for that workshop. That's where we met. And then I did 2 projects with him in Spain and in Denmark. It's also when I was restructuring the Arts Collaboratory Network, that CCA Lagos was part of. Bisi couldn't come, so she said, I'm sending my assistant. You'll see he's amazing, amazing. And that's how I met Babyface. And that was in 2011 in Cairo, during the chaos of the Arab Revolution. So I also want to hear from them. I told them they are not allowed to cry. Emeka, we already cried last week. So what do you have to say about your relationship with that badass?
Good evening, everyone. This is very hard for me, but I'll start by saying I'm very grateful that I met Bisi. I don't think I would be where I am today as an artist without Bisi. She was the first person to call me a sound artist. I remember everyone knows Bisi. And when I started recording sound, I remember bumping into her for the first time physically in Bogobiri. I forgot how we got into conversation, but basically I told her what I was doing. And she's like, you're a sound artist. I'm like, no, I just record sound. I said, what are you doing with it? I'm like, practically, I just record sound and listen to it. So you're a sound artist. So I think she was really excited that someone in Lagos was working with a different medium. And basically she set this high jump for me. And I accepted I was a sound artist, thinking it would end there, but she just kept pushing. And I had to keep upping my game. And she was invited for this conference in Cape Town in 2009, and she told them she didn't have time to come, but maybe there was this interesting artist that maybe they should talk to him. And that was really my first break, and it was Bisi. And you know, she was there all the time. You know, sorry, this is harder. Bisi was someone that was very thorough, you know, and you have to, every time I had to meet Bisi, you have to be ready. You know, I'm not one of those that have to prepare at hand, but I had to prepare at hand. I had to be ready, and that meant I had to keep stepping up my game, because she'll be like, okay, what is this? Where are you going with this? What are you planning to do? And you know, you have to be ready with all the answers. And not just that, she was also checking up a lot. And a very major turning point was when she encouraged us to set up Video Art Network Lagos. Myself, Jude, and Oyinda. And not many people supported us when we started this, but Bisi was there, and she kept on pushing. You know, we weren't that serious at the beginning, but she kept. What Bisi did best was she put you out there. You know, she will put you in touch with all the international curators, but she's not backing you up. She basically like pushed you off the ledge, and that's it. You better fly or you crash. You know, and I'm grateful for that, because she prepared me. You know, and when you started going international, you realize what Bisi was doing. You know, she was getting you ready for the world. You know, but I think the best, or the fondest memory I had about Bisi was when my mom passed away. She gave me the support that I didn't get so much from the art community, because many people didn't know me that well, but she knew me, and she knew what I was passing through, and you know, she was there. And the best part was working on this book with Bisi. She did my first monogram. I did that with Bisi, and I've done another book, and it's really the experience I had with working with Bisi on this monogram that made it possible for us to do the second book. But because she was 100% on point and thorough, and we had to go through everything, we had to revise everything, every single word, every single image, and you learn a lot in that process of putting these things together. And she was basically there, and now she's no more, you know. But we're not here to mourn or feel sad. I feel very grateful. I still say it. I would not be where I am today. Bisi was one of the people that put me here, and I'm very grateful.
Baby face.
You know, BC's mom used to always call me little boy. When I first met BC, it actually happened virtually. I was in Philadelphia at the time, and I just finished my undergraduate degree at Temple University. And the painter Odili Odita was someone who was teaching at my university. And I said to him that I wanted to go to Lagos to study contemporary art. And he said, well, you should reach out to Bisi. And I had no basis for understanding who she was at the time. And I did a lot of research, and she had this blog called Art Speak Africa, which is a very important resource for people who wanting to have some insight into contemporary art on the continent. And so I started reading and following the blog, and I reached out to her, and we had a Skype meeting. And I told her that I wanted to do this Fulbright, and I wanted to come to Lagos to study art. And by the end of the conversation, and at the time I was probably like 20 or 21 or something, and by the end of the conversation, she had already put me to work. she'd asked me to help her travel an exhibition to museums in the US. And I was just this kid, I had no basis for being able to facilitate contacts with curators and museums. But it's indicative of the kind of resourcefulness that she mobilized all throughout her career, especially in starting CCA. When I came to CCA in 2009, the first thing that I worked on was the publication for this video art exhibition. And then we worked on the newsletter, and I worked on exhibitions with her. But one of the most important, I think, earliest experiences, which is captured here in this photograph, is that she was insistent that I travel as much as possible. Bisi loved to travel throughout Africa, and she had an enormous knowledge of cities and artistic practices happening all across the continent. From Burundi to Kigali to South Africa and Joburg and Cape Town, all across West Africa, Luanda, North Africa. She traveled extensively, and as Ngoni mentioned, she often spent her Christmases traveling, especially going to places that she'd never been before. And in those early years in 2009, 2010, she and I traveled to Cotonou together and Bamako together. It was the first time I ever been to a Biennale, was in Bamako with her, and then I ended up being one of the curators for the Bamako Biennale in 2015 with her again. And so, yeah, I think over a 10-year period, she was unquestionably one of the most important figures in my life, both professionally but also personally. She was an immense presence in terms of, navigating the art world and making professional decisions. And I think that, there's so many other artists and curators, as suggested by Emeka's comments and also Ngoni's comments, that have been influenced by her. In some ways, I actually think that she's probably had one of the most measurable influences on contemporary African art from an interpersonal perspective. Because artists all over the continent, especially through ASICO, were very much inspired by her honesty. Yesterday, Abraham Ohobaze was speaking about how, in his critiques, and Emeka also mentioned this, that when you went to see Bisi and you showed her your work, you had to prepare yourself. You had to really, really mentally prepare yourself, in part because you knew that she would be honest and candid. And that's not commonplace in discussions with curators. Sometimes curators are inclined to say nice things because they want you to feel good as a result of some kind of encounter. But Bisi was intense and she was fearless, and yeah. And in terms of memorable moments, when I left Lagos, I moved to Chicago around 2011, and we continued to work on the Ojikere exhibition that happened in Helsinki, and we also worked on the Ojikere monograph, and we worked on the Bamako Biennale, and a lot of these things were happening remotely. So there was a time difference of about 6 hours, and she would often call me at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I would answer the phone in the middle of the night thinking that there was something wrong, because why else would someone call you at 4 o'clock in the morning? And I would say hello, and she would say, "Twan, what time is it there?" And I would say, "It's 4 o'clock in the morning." And she would go, "Oh, really?" And I would say, "Yeah, what time did you think it was?" And she would go, "Wakey, wakey, please, I just have to ask you one question." And that one question would turn into like a 3-hour conversation. And throughout that conversation, I would constantly be trying to end the conversation because I wanted to go back to sleep or I wanted to prepare for something. And without fail, at the end of the conversation, she would say, "You know what your problem is?" And I would go, "What?" She would say, "You talk too much." Even though it was her who was keeping me on the phone. And those conversations, the countless conversations that I feel honored and privileged to have had with her, is something that has had an immeasurable influence on my thinking and my ambitions and my regard for the city of Lagos and my regard for art in general. And yeah, I'll end there.
So I think we've spoken enough, otherwise we're going to crash, the three of us, especially Emeka, and I'm getting emotional. So if there are some questions, I also ask that Joke Silva comes so we can finally meet. Because since my sister stole your sister, so now it's our turn to be the new best friends, and I will make sure that that happens. So yes, any comments from the audience? Also, maybe the ArtX team, how that first ArtX edition that you two crazy women decided when we had that conversation at the Dakar Biennial, we were in May, and then they're saying it's opening early November, and I said I know Nigerians are crazy, but this is not going to happen. And you made it, and you forced me to embark on that journey, and I'm still here, and you've been progressing. So there are many layers, stories, anecdote. As I said, she used to call me partner sister in crime or curator sister in crime. We always behaved like an old couple. We were very, very different in personalities, in different styles, but there was this thing, that promise that we made, when Amaise first introduced us, we will always look after each other. In those days, we were the only two female curators in West Africa operating internationally, where people were just talking nonsense. By the way, people are still talking nonsense, so I hope that this new generation will have it sorted out. So it's, I'm sure, I couldn't come to the funerals, of course. I thought I would just be miserable. I know that Odile came. Where is Ndidi? Ndidi has been bombarding me with WhatsApp messages, and I told her, stop, I can't take it, and I won't be, and I even stopped reading the WhatsApp messages. Yes, this was also 2 years ago here with Jideka, after Jideka's talk. So if people have crazy anecdotes to share about my badass, we're open to hear. I know that people have been asking to write some comments. I'm going to break the rule. Since Tayo decided to abandon us, she was supposed to moderate. I don't know what I'm moderating anyway. So if people have funny anecdotes, like who has ever saw Bisi drunk? I did, because she will only drink when I was around. So those kind of funny stories, so she keeps alive in our memories. Nobody wants to say anything? Amaise, you don't want to say anything? Ndidi? No? Okay. Tayo? Okay. No? No, no, no. Dudun? No. Sandra? Okay, can we have a mic for Sandra, please?
Thank you. First of all, thanks to the organizers for organizing this talk at the end of a very rich week. We all miss Bisi, trying not to be emotional. I don't have any funny anecdote, but a few years ago I was doing a film on the creative sector, and I went to Bisi and I asked her to give me insight into the visual art sector. And she introduced me to Kainabi, she introduced me to Uchejo Chima. We were working with Peju. It was a very rich time, and Bisi was always able to be irreverent. That's what I remember about her. She had a sense of humor, she was irreverent. And she had treasures that she was able to curate in such a very natural way, with no ego at all. Joke and I were sitting together a few days after she passed, and Jide Bello walked in, and we were looking at some photographs on her coffee table. They were black and white photos. And Joke said, you know, I've been looking at these pictures and wondering who are the family members. I don't quite recognize them. And Jide Bello laughed and said, oh my God, these are photos of the biggest photographers in Africa, Sidibe and co. And they were just there. They were just part of her home with all her books. Actually, I was surprised because there was not much art on her wall. It was literally full of books. And so we miss her and we love her, and we just honor her memory, and her seed is in all of us. We remember her almost on a daily basis. And wherever you are, BC, we're smiling up at you, and we know you're smiling down at us. Thank you.
Just what you said about her with books. I remember one day we were in Paris, and she was, I don't know where she was traveling to, and she was supposed to go to a very posh event. So we said, okay, we're in the city of fashion, let's go and buy you high heels and new outfit, etc. And we passed a bookshop. We spent the entire afternoon in the bookshop. She had to buy a suitcase to put the books. So she went to that posh event with a suitcase full of books and no high heels to wear. And I couldn't give her any of my high heels because she has tiny feet. So that was precisely her obsession with knowledge, education, and I guess that's why she started CCA, to have that platform, and that's why she was pushing all of the artists that she met is, yes, what about the substance? What are your references? If it's just about the aesthetics, and we used to say, oh, these butterflies who are all over the place, jumping like monkeys, and pretending that they are the new darling in town, but who is going to resist the test of time? So it's true, we will go to shop to find high heels, and we will end up buying only books, and then trying to find ways, how do we ship the books? And every time she would come to Dakar, then at the end I said to my sister, listen, now it's your friend, right? I'm just a colleague. So you'll find ways with DHL to ship all these books to Lagos, I don't care. And at the end, actually, it's my mother who was her other new best friend, because then my mother's driver became Bisi's driver. Anyway, so then they will sort it out with DHL. So, yes. Pedro is going to replace Bisi on a project I'm working on for Africa 2020 that Bisi was supposed to handle, and we're having that first meeting next week with Chika Okeke and Pedro Lariola. Yes, because my last WhatsApp with her was 2 days before she passed, and of course she didn't tell me how sick she was, so I was quite angry, and it's Bimpe who calls me saying, sorry for your loss, and that's how she told me. So it's Bimpe who called me that day. And in that morning, I was talking to the girls of Contemporary End, trying to figure out another project that we wanted BC to carry on. So yes, so it was a crazy February, I can tell you. I locked myself in my house, but we will all get over it. And I just remember, I can say at the end of the day, I'm the only one who made her drink alcohol. She got drunk, she got sick because she's not a professional drinker, which I am, of course. So that's why I can proudly say I remade her evil. And we used to behave like an old couple, yell at each other, keep on disagreeing, but at the end of the day, it was always about what are we giving back to our continent and how do we give back to the next generation. Something I learned from her doing the project in Bamako, where we're first in a very modest hotel, and she just came in front of the director and said, do you think I will leave the comfort of my house in Lagos to come and suffer in Bamako? I don't do that. And I said, she's right. Malians get real. So that's also something I always keep in mind when people are, especially in some, let's say, rich countries, thinking that because you are an African or because you come from a developing country, that a modest something, little something will be fine for you, or a modest hotel. No, we are human beings, we are professionals, we have been working in this field for more than 30 years. If you don't acknowledge that, then we're not going to do anything together. And it's that integrity that she had, respecting artists with whom she worked, making sure that everybody was going to be paid, even if at the end of the day we will not be paid. And for that, Bamako, Banya, that she was an artistic director, when the French were driving her crazy, I said, put all the family on the jury. And just the fact that if we all come as a group to be on that jury, just that crowd, people, the French will get the message. You as Bisi Silva, you have your people, and they will get real. And that's how we did. And other people who were not even invited all came just to mobilize and just to show to the French Institute, this person, you should be lucky to have her as an artistic director. And if you don't understand that, we can start a war, because Bamako is also one of our cities. Yes, I remember she posted this on the, that was last year in July at the Nigerian embassy in Paris, yes.
Good evening, everybody. I basically arrived here this afternoon just to catch, particularly to catch this event and to pay tribute to Bisi, as all of us are here to do. Mine is not a long story, but I think we all acknowledge or recognize that in our lives, some people come into your life at a point that they become a permanent image in your life, whatever. We met at one of the art events in Lagos and got into a conversation. You share your interests, and she becomes very supportive, like Emeka was saying. A few points. One, we got into the project to build a museum at Onitsha. Onitsha is, is upland, and 90% or 99% of art events in Nigeria happen in Lagos. And we think that there should be a spread, and the people in the provincial areas ought to also be part of appreciating art and creating art and all of that. And I asked Bisi to be on the board of trustees of the museum that hasn't even come into existence. And of course, she was very delighted to be on the board of trustees. And the next thing, she sends me notes, endlessly, set up a fundraising committee, have a focal point, drop a list of all the potential donors, go after them. And I said, Mother Superior, that's, I said, my mother is talking to me again. But she had a point, and we actually followed all her suggestions, and things got better. And every moment you run into her, she will ask you how you're doing, and then she gives you more suggestions. She curated the event here at Federal Palace Hotel a couple of years ago, the African Designers Conference, and she was the curator. And on the opening ceremony, I was there as a guest of honor, and she took me around the whole place, very enthusiastic. But the most memorable I'll point out was traveling with her to Bamako. Bamako keeps playing back and back and back. We were on a flight to Bamako together. We met at the airport and realized we were traveling together. And I said to Bisi, I have 2 days in Bamako. What should I do, as far as the creative arts in Mali is concerned, to enjoy and to get some satisfaction? He says, 3 people you must meet. Malik Sidibe, Sam Sidibe, who's the curator of the National Museum, and Abdullahi Konate. And I said, I must meet these 3 people. Abdullahi was not so difficult because his residence and studio was not far from the hotel where I was staying. The National Museum, I spent a whole day with Sam, but to track down Malik Sidibe was difficult. We made the first attempt, we turned back, finally got to his studio, and there was a lot of conversation, and I said, just tell him I want to see him. And Bisi said, you must have your portrait taken by Malik Sidibe. If anything else in your life, he must take your portrait. So I kept trying and trying. Eventually they said he wasn't around. I said, okay, tell him I'm coming back tomorrow, which was my final day. They said no. When he comes back, we shall call you. Give us your phone number, and I gave to them. They didn't call, and I traveled. I think a couple of weeks later, the news broke that Malik had passed on. So Malik was very ill at that time, but they didn't want to tell me. But again, that was Bisi's passion, she was traveling up country. So in fact, she moved on immediately. And we kept in touch with that. Life in My City Art Festival at Enugu, she was there as chairman of the board of judges and all of that. I'm a trustee. So we worked together. But the final point was that in February, I was in Addis Ababa. I've been introduced to Meskaram Asegwad, who, with our partner, our colleague, had created the Zuma Museum. The finishing touches were going on. I spent a whole day with them. Fantastic, creative initiative there. Meskaram was supposed to be here, but they have a project that the Prime Minister has given to them, so she couldn't come and all that. And at a point, we got talking about Bisi. And it's all wonderful, the impact on her, the impact on me, how wonderful she is. And she is wonderful. And her sister is here, Joke, who always refers to me as Bisi's friend, and so on. And I traveled back and beheld the news that Bisi had passed away. And I sent a note back to Meskaram. She couldn't reply. Eventually when she replied, she was so overtaken. I was overtaken. But, we didn't create ourselves. Some supreme being, God created all of us. So whatever we do, we're grateful to God. And how long we live, we're grateful to God. I think if you've left an impact on humanity, you've done the greatest you can as a creator of God, and Bisi has done that. At that point, all I could do was to send a message to Joke, which she didn't even receive, or she didn't see it because it was a very hectic, emotional time. But in my own position today, I don't get directly involved with funerals. So this is my first opportunity to pay tribute to Bisi. Well, let's leave it like that. Her life is there. She's left a legacy that will live forever. And we'll all join her one of these days. And so let's continue to do our best, that she has done her best, until we all meet again. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. I think I finally found my voice. First, I think it's good for me to correct you in terms of dates. We first met in the year 2000, because that was the first time I came to Paris with my father. And I came later, the exhibition opened in April. I came later in September. And then I met with the Nigerian artist who is based in Antwerp now. I remember, Ottobong. Ottobong was the one who introduced both of us, and then later on I introduced you to Bisi. I think Bisi was racing against time, and so she pushed everyone until you break the wall and then you can pass through. I think I met her first in '98 when she was having her series of lectures in Lagos. And then, well, we got invited to all these art meets at that time. And then afterwards, I think she went back to London. And when I was in Europe in 2000, I sent an email to her. Then she told me she was in Paris. I said I was going to be in Paris. And then we met later. Before she got soaked into the art world, that was when she was doing some business, I think setting up like a software company. Bisi made sure that he introduced us to everybody, around the world in terms of art. Because then The depth of field was just starting in 2001. And I think in 2005 or thereabout, she introduced us to some of her friends abroad. And I think we had our first exhibition then. No, we had our first exhibition in Belgium, then had the other one in London. Bisi worked hard. She worked very hard for the Art Society. The Art Society in Nigeria, promoting Nigerian artists, and then introducing them to the outside world. She worked selflessly. She was selfless. She was honest. And then she also deprived herself. She was not totally concerned about what was going to come to her as a person. But as soon as she was able to recognize a talent, she just let it be and contributed very hard to ensure that that artist got to the highest level. It was very, very interesting to work with her on all the different projects that we had to work together. And the high point was working on my father's book. At that time, you would not believe that Bisi was sick, but she worked like somebody who had all the energy in the world, much more like 3, 4, 5, 6 people working together in one. She would call you up, she would, ask you questions at different times, at night, early in the morning. She pushed for the highest level of efficiency in you at all times. And she did not believe in any barriers, in like stopping her to getting to where she was going to get to. I remember her trying to raise funds for the book and how she has met, with a lot of people, friends, telling her, ce n'est pas l'argent, ce n'est pas l'argent. It was tough for her until she did crowdfunding. I mean, she had gone around. She was so determined for that book to come out. And she worked tirelessly at it. We will miss her, and we hope that someday there will be another Bisi in Nigeria. Thank you.
Hello, I knew Bisi, but I think I knew her as just someone who really admired her energy and her work, and I met her in Paris last May as well. But I think my comment really, or thought sitting here is, perhaps the best compliment we can ever pay her memory is what happens next. You are the only 2 West African curators who are recognized internationally and who obviously trailblazers. And I just wonder, and asking you, Ngone, what's the next generation of curators looking like on the continent? Who's responsible for bringing up, not who will actually bring the artists up, but who are the curators and how are they being trained and what are the resources available? And has all the work that you both have done, come to fruition? That's my question.
No, but thanks God we're no longer in the 90s. So now you have curators all over, not just in the continent, but also in the diaspora. So I will just say what I've been telling to these new generation of curators: be true to yourself. If you are into this for the fame, then you're just lying to yourself. Do never lie to yourself. And you work hard, and you learn every day at every stage of your life. You're always constantly updating your knowledge, your understanding, because there's constantly new discoveries, new generations of artists as well. So the last thing you want is to become obsolete. So I'm just asking and wherever I go, that's even when I was teaching in universities, whether it's in Cape Town or in Niger or in Egypt, it's that rigor of why are you doing this? What's your role? And what are you giving back to the society, to the next generation of artists? And how are you interacting also with people? Is it about being selfish? Is it about being generous? But we have curators now. We're no longer in that kind of painful moment where you think you have to do everything yourself. Yes, there are some countries where there's still no curators, but the landscape has changed a lot. And some of these curators are here in the room, so they can also acknowledge that times have changed, and then things are moving forward. What's next? I think it's just keeping up with that same level of integrity and respecting artists and reminding curators that without artists, we are out of job. So it's the collaboration with artists. There's no power game. Do your homework, update your knowledge, and also for artists themselves to, yes, and I think the best thing we can all do is that rigor that she had, and yes, more books and less shoes. I still keep on buying a lot of shoes. But yes, I think that's what I will say. Then what happens next in Lagos? Who are the young curators in this country? For them to sort it out and to be Pan-African. That was also something the two of us had in common.
Good evening, everybody. It's still a bit raw. So, if I cry, excuse me. Bisi and myself are only 8 months apart. And walking into Art X yesterday and just remembering that, you know, she was with you the first year, and then the second year I can't even remember this outfit that she wore, some black get-up, you know, and, you know, she was, was it Jimmy Choo or something? One of these Japanese somethings, you know, tied it all around her, you know, and she looked gorgeous. We had just come from an award ceremony that the medical association had done for our mom, and then we came together for the Artex, and then walking into Artex yesterday. With one of my sisters, Muji Olawaye, we just held each other and we were trying, you know, especially when we saw Tayo, we just tried not to break down. I'm going to give you the unartistic side of Bisi, so you see the other person outside the artist, outside the curator. But it's a bit difficult because she was both. The artist, the curator was Bisi, the loving human being was Bisi, both mixed together. As kids, she was the slim one. My sister was amazingly beautiful. I mean, she was beautiful at 50, but when we were younger, God, the girl was stunning. She had an incredibly long neck, an incredibly long waist, and she was such a dancer. Always had, you know, she had a lot of hair when we were younger. I don't know what happened. Then she got to Europe and cut off everything, and she remained short hair for quite a while. And we'd sit down together. I was the big one at that time. And we'd sit down together, and people would come to talk to us, and they'll be saying to Bisi, hey, Joke, whatever, and talk to me and say, Bisi, whatever. And we couldn't get it. Was it that we looked so alike? That, you know, but I guess there was just something about us. People just used to mix us with each other, and we used to play this game on them. We wouldn't let them know that they were talking to the wrong person. So we just used to hear all sorts of things that the other person shouldn't hear. It was great fun. And then many years later, my sister got into, she got into art. And I went to visit her in London, but, and she took me to this place. And said, she wanted me to see installation art. Now, I'm a Niger babe. Art for us, you buy the art, you hang it on your wall. That's the art we understood. If it wasn't hung on your wall, then it's a sculpture, like, something that Ndidi would do. You buy it and put it in your house. Do you understand? And then this girl comes and says, come and see installation art. And I'm like, okay, let's go. So I went to this place, I entered this room, and there was this coffin, white coffin with a gun on it, and then there were these pictures of eyes peeping through, like photographs of eyes peeping through some gaps. And it gave you a kind of feeling, and I'm like, Bisi, what's this? And she says, installation art. I said, okay, installation art. And who is going to buy it? Which part of their house are they going to put it? Joke, no, it's not like that. That's not what it's in. Slow down, madam. Yes. So what? And then she said, okay, what does it make you feel? How do you feel? Interpret it for me. And I would. She said, that's it. That's why it's there. That's why the person has done it, so that you could get this feeling. And she did that with all our friends. We had the same group of friends. Anytime anybody visited Bisi outside of the arts world, she would drag you to one exhibition or the other, and she got you hooked on art. My sister was an amazing, sometimes it's a bit hard going walls about Bisi. She was an amazing soul. Both of us had daughters. Mine passed away at 10 and a half. Hers passed away at 1 day old. And till the day my sister died, she had the picture of my daughter on her bedroom side table. She had that picture of her I think she was about 3 years old. And she had, even when she was away, when she was abroad, she had it. And when she came back home, she still had it with her. She was an amazing auntie to all her nieces and all her nephews. She didn't always remember the birthdays. But whenever she saw you, because she was traveling all over the place all the time, she would make time out to take them out somewhere, find out what they were doing, especially how they were doing in school. And if you were not pulling your weight in school, she wanted to know why. She was, she was just that kind of a person. And education for her was not just having a university education. It was having an idea of what was going on in the world and what was going on, where Nigeria was in Africa, the place of Nigeria in Africa and the place of Africa in the diaspora. My sister hated mediocrity with a passion. You couldn't get past her with mediocrity. It used to drive her insane. And I think that was one of the things that actually galvanized her to push as a curator in Nigeria. It was just that when she came back, there were a lot of incredible works from the old brigade, but a lot of the new brigade, where there was too much posturing. It drove her insane. She just couldn't stand it. There was a lot of posturing going on, and it just, So that was it for her. She just had to get into this field and push and make way for younger people. It was never about Bisi. It was always about growing the ecosystem of that area of art. And I guess another thing that I'd like to share with you, it was crazy, because I've done not too badly in the performing arts, and it used to really, really annoy her when we'd go anywhere and everyone, oh, you're Joke Silva's sister. It drove her mad. Especially with all the work she had done in the art space, So one of the things that really, she was so happy when I said, I went to Onitsha and I met the Obi, and the first thing he said to me was, are you Bisi Silva's sister? And oh, my sister was happy. Finally, somebody saying that. But then that only happened in places like Lagos or wherever film or theater was being watched. Because if you go anywhere in the art circle, forget it, they didn't even know who the hell I was. And you were going to any of these, and if you go to the Tate or any of these, big museums in other parts of the world, just say you are related to Bisi Silva. You get the red carpet. She was just an incredible person. I guess you asked that what's next. Part of it, I know that you're going to do your possible best to make sure that all the young curators express themselves, are honest with themselves as much as possible. But we also have to make sure that CCA doesn't die. So Bisi's her passion was for CCA. And one of the ways that I don't know what gave me that, when we had the first board meeting on CCA, I remember telling all the other board members, I said, listen, whoever is going to lead CCA can only lead CCA following their own vision. Yes, the general vision of Bisi was that Africa is a host at the table. Africa is not taking the crumbs under the table. Africa is not dinner on the table. Africa is not a waiter at the table. Africa is a host, is one of the hosts at the table. That's her vision broadly, paraphrasing Lumumba. But I also know that whoever had CCA has to run with their own vision, has to run with what they see. And so that was what I told Ihiai, who is our curator now in CCA. And the way I described it to him, I said, look at CCA like the House of Dior. The House of Dior, every so often, is always changing their director, their artistic director, their designer, their chief designer. Every so often it changes. And so you'll have Dior by, and so we'll have CCA by, for as long as he deigns to remain with us for that long. And then maybe the next person will come. But so far, he is doing an amazing job. They've had so many exhibitions, so many, they have one running currently, which is just so, it's so moving when you see it's about the diaspora in movement and seeing, and how, when we're talking about the diaspora and talking about people in motion, it's the whole world that's in motion. We keep forgetting that we have a lot of Lebanese immigrants in Nigeria who are first-generation immigrants, for instance, in Lagos. And they're doing exactly the same thing that most immigrants do. They're very successful, and they're repatriating money home, just like our own people in other parts of the world are doing. It's just so exciting. Yes, my sister has passed on. She passed on in my arms in February. She did me the honor, actually, of telling everybody who saw her in London. She says, oh, no, don't worry, I'm going to go home. My sister will pick me, and I'm coming home. I'm not dying in London. And she came home, and she lived with us for 2 weeks, and she passed away in my arms. Yes, she's passed, but she's not passed. She's not passed. She lives in each and every single person that she has touched positively. And even in each and every person that she touched negatively, they will remember her. And I just want to thank ArtX for this tribute to her. Thank you, Tayo, for inviting me to speak about her. Thank you all for all your support over the last couple of months. And thank you for the new sister that I'm finally going to meet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Bisi Silva, for that wonderful tribute. If there is anything that we think of here now, listening to the fond memories, it is that Bisi was a tour de force. She was bold, she was brave, she was powerful. The fact that so many of us were working with her on projects during the time of her illness, you know, and in Nigeria, there's always those slangs about, you know, illnesses when no they show for face. In Bisi's case, you had absolutely no way of knowing. She ran faster than I was running, and I was in my early 30s. I'm in my early 30s, but she was running faster than I was running. And I was exhausted sometimes when she would tell me her schedule. And I would have to, you know, Antawan, she was calling you at 4 a.m. in the morning. Sometimes I had to call her at 4 a.m. in the morning in whatever country she was in. And I was astounded that she would even ask me to call her at such a time. But that was the only time that she had, and that was when I could get to talk to her. Ngone asked a question about how it was that between February 2016 and November 2016, we decided to do the mad dash to create the very first Artex Lagos. We debated it. It seemed like a really crazy thing to do. Our currency went from 180 naira to the dollar to 300 and about 50 or 360 naira to the dollar in the space of 4 or 5 months. The question was, would collectors even be open to looking at art at this time? But there was a sense of urgency that we both felt. I suspect her sense of urgency came for more personal reasons. And in my case, it was in recognizing that this brilliant woman was ready to do this with me, ready to run this race with me. And I knew that this was the kind of thing that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, really. Because what I came to realize and recognize was that Bisi Silva saying that she would be our first artistic director was an endorsement. Because as her sister has said, and as others have said, wherever we went, or I went and I mentioned the name Bisi Silva, I got a hug. I didn't just get a, oh, that's nice. I got an instant breaking down of any barrier, breaking down of any resistance that the individual I was meeting, and this was all over the world, Basel, Senegal, everywhere. Bisi was generous to us all, and one thing I want us to remember is Bisi's resolute commitment to Africa. She had everything within her power to be elsewhere. And what I found astounding was that no matter where she went in the world, she always came home. And this, as many of us know, is not necessarily the easiest place in the world to make our home. But Bisi chose Lagos and Nigeria as her home, and she was so deliberate about it. And that for me was inspirational, because I was a young person recommitting to being in Nigeria. I had spent 8 years prior in Nigeria. I had gone to a business school, and people thinking me mad for deciding I was coming back without even a backward glance. And that was where we found ourselves to be kindred spirits. And even though she's the same age as my mother, she never treated me like a junior. She treated me, this person who had not worked in the art world, like a peer. I was handling the business side, the strategy, the fundraising. She was the artistic content. She gave me respect that really, I know many her age in our society would have struggled to give to a young person, and I in turn deferred to her in so many ways. My respect for her is so unbelievably vast, because when I sit here and I look at Artex Lagos being the vehicle through which we get to honor Bisi today, I can say on behalf of myself and my team that it is a profound privilege. We are incredibly proud that the journey she helped us start and begin continues. And proud that the fair has gone on to become what I hoped it would and what she hoped it would as well. And that we now get this phenomenal opportunity to celebrate her, to remember her, to remind so many here who may not have known her. I certainly don't know her as well as you did, but to let so many here know that this was an incredible light, an incredible force. And I can see so many people in the audience nodding, because I know that there are very many of us in Nigeria who are determined to ensure that the work that she begun never ends. I would like especially to thank Ngone. Ngone has been a mother to those of us who are here, choosing, like Bisi did, to stay here and to do this work here. Ngone is an incredible mentor and friend to myself, and also to Folakunle Oshun of the Lagos Biennial. Ngone has adopted us in the absence of Bisi. And Ngone, I'd really like to thank you for being part of this conversation, in spite of how challenging we knew it was going to be for you. Emeka, I thank you as well. And Antawan, I thank you as well. And to everyone who commented, Your Highness, I thank you. Mrs. Nkonchu, Ms. Silva, I thank you all. I'd like to close by reading a tribute to Bisi that is actually written on the walls of the fair. If you've been to the modern art section, you may have seen the My Dream Gallery booth, which is for Mrs. Simi Adesonya. And she stuck this poster on the wall in the center of her booth with a picture of Bisi on it. It says, in memory of our dear Bisi Silva, 28th May 1962 to 12 February 2019. Passionate art lover, indefatigable art critic, international speaker and art discussant, a gallery owner with an amazing global network in the visual arts world, brilliant, articulate, visionary, bohemian yet fully integrated into Nigerian culture. When the history of the development of the visual arts in Nigeria is told, your name, Adebisi Obafunke Silva, will be etched in gold. I saw this today as I went past, and I took a photo of it because I found it so moving. And I would like to invite you all now to please stand, and for us to, this was not planned, but I think it's so important given this moment, to please stand and for us to have a moment of silence, quiet reflection and prayer for our dear friend, our sister, our mentor, and our guide, and to bear her in her thoughts now as we think about her and the journey on which she has gone. Thank you. Thank you. Bisi will never be forgotten, and I thank you all for your participation in this today. Thank you.